Coming from Central Kentucky, land of horses, bourbon, and basketball, straight to your ears, ChickenCoopGuides.com presents AgriCast Digest, your place to get news and information about anything agriculturally related. Please welcome your host, Gabrielle Yoder.
Hey folks, another week here at AgriCast Digest. I hope you're healthy, hale, and hearty wherever you are. First, I've got news, and then I've got some news. But I'll tell you all that at the end. No spoilers for fellow Doctor Who nerds. Now, for once, news can be a good thing. New Zealand just approved raw milk for sale and delivery. I know, right? Stop the presses on this. New Zealand has often been a testing ground for some weird things, many very questionable things, like using implanted ARFIDs instead of credit or debit cards to pay for things. I think they did that back in the late 80s, early 90s, kind of like some tester. So a lot of experimental things go on there apparently, but for once I'm not cringing. I'm really celebrating. Now, my husband and I, we've been buying raw milk here in the United States for almost 10 years now. And I just remember researching raw milk sales way back in 2006. Thinking about 2006 being way back. Gosh, time flies. But anyway, I remember just being flabbergasted at what kind of things that the farmers here go through just to bring their products to the admittedly black market. One of the stories I read about way back when was about a family who we actually wound up running into when we moved up here to Kentucky. And the wife runs our homeschool co-op. That's really crazy, I know. But Gary Oakes is an awesome guy. And he's a Christian man who looks at this kind of as his mission from God to provide families who want it with wholesome and healthy food. And I've met the fellow many times, and I know him and his family, which is why it really breaks my heart to think about what they've been through. I'll link the article on the podcast page for those who want to read it. But in a nutshell, this guy, he's so kind and he's soft spoken. And when you look at him, you think he's like Mennonite or something because he dresses very plain. He's got his button down shirt and his suspenders and his hat. And he's just a farm guy. And his family went through hell and back several years ago because of their mission to sell milk. And it's just milk. It's not drugs or anything. They weren't packing cocaine in the crates. It was just milk. And they sold it over state lines, which is how they wound up getting swarmed at a milk point by federal agents in like every shape and size at gunpoint. I mean, there were all kinds of people there. There were people from Kentucky, people from Ohio, the federal agents. I mean, they just went bananas. And they're not the only ones either. I think about what happened I think it was Morningland Dairy, perhaps. They were out of Missouri and they made raw cheeses, like raw milk cheeses. And their stuff was so good. I think they had like this garlic cheddar that we just went crazy over. Anyway, I remember I had bought a bunch of it and it was really delicious and it was inexpensive for what it was. And then when suddenly there wasn't it anymore available, I asked what happened, only for our buying club leader at the time to fill me in on the gruesome details. The dairy had been raided. The government took over, I think, over 30,000 pounds of raw cheese, and they put the family through a miserable experience. And there's places you can read about it online. Just look up Morningland Dairy Raid. I think there was even videos. But, the FDA doesn't even care enough to check more than 1% of all the food that's imported to the U.S. from other countries. I mean, but they care enough to raid a family farm because of cheese and milk. So go figure. But anyway, back to the good news. New Zealand's government has stated that they've tried to find a balance between risk and reward for their citizens. And I think they've done that. A lot of new research is coming in all the time talking about, how raw milk is healthy, or at least raw milk is not as risky as they've always said. There's a long story behind why pasteurization came in, and it was supposed to be a stopgap measure. It was not supposed to be temporary. It was not supposed to be permanent. Even Louis Pasteur said that. But I'm hoping that our own government will bring this to right soon. And I know a lot of folks grew up, as I did, hearing that pasteurization was like the savior of the free world, kept us all from dying from drinking tainted milk. And the reality is a lot more complicated than that. And over the next several weeks or something, I would like to, kind of touch on this once in a while. But for those interested in learning about raw milk, I'm going to post some educational links on the episode page. There's actually going to be a lot of stuff there today, so please make sure to check it out. I'll even have some stuff about the difference between A1 and A2 cows, and that kind of explains why some milk causes heart disease, as some studies have suggested, and that some milk doesn't. So what else do we have here? Oh, yeah, the dragon chickens. Okay, so I read an article about these guys in the Daily Mail, or the Daily Programmer, as I like to call them. I just where they must have like sweatshops of people they pay $2 an hour to write their articles. But they had dragon chickens. Now, they're also called dong tao. They're really wild looking. And I posted some pictures on the episode page. Did I tell you there was a lot of goodies on there today? And you can see what I mean. They have these huge fat thighs and legs, which is like why they raise them. They have like this real thick skin. They look really crazy. This breed originated in Vietnam, and I'm sure that there was some majorly weird breeding involved to get these guys to look like that, since it really does not look natural. But that doesn't stop me from thinking that they look really crazy. I don't know how else to describe it. They just look weird. I wouldn't mind one or two to kind of mingle with my own flock and kind of increase their size a bit. That'd be kind of a cool experiment, but, I digress. So anyway, these chickens managed to survive the Vietnam War, and they've been conserved successfully. They almost died out. I mean, my assistant Kim, she was just like, wow, these chickens, someone had to have held on to these chickens when everyone else was starving. So, that's a really big deal. Apparently, though, that these chickens are so big and clumsy due to the size of their massive legs that they can't even brood their own eggs since they crushed them and the chicks accidentally. So something else tells me that they weren't meant by nature to be that big. They were definitely artificially bred that way. But it doesn't really matter. They're here now, and the lucky owners of these guys have a small fortune on their hands with each chicken, so don't look for rushing out to buy one just yet. Apparently, they're between $1,000 and $2,000 per bird. I can't imagine paying $2,000 for a chicken. I don't care if it was made out of gold. They consider it a delicacy kind of reserved for those who can pay for it. And I'm sure some enterprising soul will go over there and import a few birds over to the U.S. soon so that they can sell the breed here. But it'll probably be a while. And even then, they're probably going to be going for $500 a pop, easy, if not more. To me, it really doesn't seem worth it. They're almost purely meat birds. They lay about 70 eggs a year. They can't even brood their own chicks, like I mentioned earlier. Plus, the key to their size other than breeding really seems to be raising them very slowly. So they're really expensive to bring to the table. I'd rather have a buff myself, to be honest. Buffs are awesome and, they're gentle and, they have everything you need. They're dual purpose. You can have meat, you can have eggs, best of both worlds. So, but there's going to be a place for these birds. It's not going to take too long for them to come over here. It's kind of like with the Yokohamas or I think it's Yokohama birds, the ones with the really long tail feathers, and they're just, really diva birds. And people raise them for show. So if they're going to raise them for show, then eventually the dragon chickens are going to make it over here. I would be surprised if KFC's all over that one. But the key to raising them from what I understand, is the slow growing. So it's possible that the U.S. bird market won't be interested. Let's see here. Q&A. Okay. I got a question here. I've got the first question today from Clarette Leslie. And she writes, it's extremely hot here in Arizona. I put a trough in the cage with water and sometimes wet the ground. And they seem to love it, but it dries up within 2 hours anyways. Is this acceptable? Also, I have 5 chickens, but I only get 1 egg a day and they're very small. The chickens are 5 months old. Is this normal? I'm also giving them laying mash and oyster shells. Anything else I should be doing? Well, thanks for asking, Clarette. First, let me thank our assistant, Kim, for helping with the Q&A and the podcast in general. We really would not be very successful without her, and you have her entirely to thank for the information here, since I was not only stumped but swamped with other stuff, which I'll talk about at the end of the podcast. That's our big news. So I'm sure that this information this is information most of us will be using very soon if we haven't really needed it already. Here in Kentucky, we've been we've had some heat waves, but for the most part, it's been pretty pleasant. Highs in the 80s, so it's been really great. Now, obviously, chickens don't have sweat glands, so their bodies have to find some other way to rid their body of heat and maintain a normal body temperature at about 105 degrees. They lose heat through their wattles, their shanks, and unfeathered areas like underneath their wings. So you'll notice that they're panting, and this kind of helps them cool down, but it also helps them produces more body heat when they pant. So your birds are going to eat less during the hot weather. So you want to make sure that they're fed, that the feed is getting that they're getting is nutrient dense. It may also help to feed them earlier or later in the day when the weather's cooler. That way they'll eat a little bit more so that they can still produce eggs. One of the biggest keys is the same as for humans, which is they need to have plenty of water. And the cooler, the better. If it's at all possible, you should try to change it a couple times a day in the heat and replace the warm water for the cool water. Although warm water is obviously better than nothing at all. You can try adding ice to it. Or you could maybe even try putting it out as ice first thing in the morning and see how that goes. Maybe do that twice a day. You can fill pans or shallow containers with it and then place them somewhere shady, like outdoor areas or in the coop where it kind of be, cooler a little bit. Some people like to add frozen pieces of fruit or herbs to the water to encourage the chickens to spend time pecking at it. And they get the added benefit of the extra nutrients. And I've heard of some people providing kind of shallow kiddie pools for their birds to stand in. I've actually seen people with this. They have the little blue pools. And they toss the fruit and herbs to kind of entice them to go in. So that may be worth a try for the really hot weather at this time of year in Arizona. And you may want to add electrolytes to their drinking water. This is a homemade recipe from Gail Desmoreaux of the Chicken Encyclopedia, and I'll make sure to post this on the episode page as well so you don't have to worry about writing this down. You want to get a half teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, a teaspoon of table salt, a tablespoon of sugar, and a gallon of water. And you can give this instead of drinking water for 4 to 6 hours per day. The rest of the day, just kind of give it plain water. You give it only to the chickens who are suffering from heat stress. Otherwise, it's going to alter normal electrolyte levels. Now, you can try feeding frozen berries as well as refrigerated cabbages and melons for coolness and for the added nutrition. Make sure your coop has good ventilation. You can use a fan. A solar run fan is really good. And then you can look into using an evaporative cooler or a fine fogger, but be sure that you've got the proper ventilation so you don't end up with a mold issue. It's okay to kind of lightly spray your birds with water. You can get one of the little spray bottles. Just don't drench them with it. If they're free range, make sure that there's some shade nearby. And they'll probably head there and make a nice cool dust bath. And just leave them alone in the heat of the day. You can kind of lightly spray their outside run area with water if you like, but again, don't drench it. Keep some plants in the area. That'll help keep things cooler than just the bare dirt. Even if it's like yucca. Yucca actually has water in it, which, if you live out in the desert, I'm sure you know that. So yucca would be a good desert plant for that. The best bet is really designing your coop so that there's a good airflow. You're really well situated with the sun. You think about the summer and winter time, and then make sure there's a bit of shade nearby. Heat can most definitely result in the decrease of egg production. It's going to do that. Usually in the really hot summer months here in Kentucky, the hens don't lay very much. It's kind of like when they get the depths of winter, they do the same thing. Let's see here. Next question is from John Fortna. And John writes, when I was a kid living at home, my brother and I raised chickens for several years, and this is a problem I don't ever remember running into. I have a hen who has started going around plucking the down feathers from the other chickens and eating them. She's become quite well at doing it. Quite good at doing it, and has the other chickens looking bald badly. It wouldn't be so bad, I guess, but the other hens have learned from her and are now beginning to do it too. I'm not sure what to do about it. I'm sure it's causing some problems in my egg production. I know with my chickens today, they are getting better food than the ones I had when I was a kid. I'm even giving my current flock oyster shells, which the ones years ago never even heard of, nor did I. I know it's probably something simple that I can do, but I have no idea what this is. Do they need a special vitamin, or do I need to get the lady some tennis lessons? Please let me know if you can help me. Thanks, John. Well, happy chickens don't peck at each other. So there's a couple of causes. To deal with the problem, you really have to figure out why they're not happy. And you want to do this, you want to deal with it because this type of activity can lead to cannibalism. They're really, chickens are really curious by nature. And as you found out, this can easily become a learned behavior practiced by all once someone gets interested. So it's going to be a behavior that all of them, one is going to start spreading to the others. Feather picking isn't necessarily aggression. Now, with aggressive birds, you're generally going to have them pecking at the top of the head or the comb. And I believe there was something written recently on the blog, and if there wasn't, I'll look it up. There's like game hens, which are hens that were used for fighting. So they're going to be a little bit more naturally aggressive, but generally most hens aren't. But with the aggressive birds, they're going to usually peck at the top of the head or the comb. And with feather picking, they usually go for the base of the tail, the back, the tail feathers, and wing feathers. For that, boredom is usually the cause. Chickens, as you know, will peck at anything and everything. So if there's nothing to peck at, they'll start pecking at each other. So the boredom prevention devices work like a charm. Cabbage, lettuce, other vegetables that they can entertain themselves with by trying to peck at them, just hang them up. They're really happy for hours. You can toss an old overripe melon in there, some overgrown zucchini. You can spread leaves, grass clippings, or hay all over the floor and sprinkle black oil sunflower seeds or oats all over it, and you can let them have fun scratching and hunting for them. If your birds don't already free range, you might want to try that one. Let's see here. Check your flock for parasites, since lice and mites and things can kind of cause some strange behaviors, those external parasites. Make a dust bath for them with diatomaceous earth or wood ashes sprinkled in to kind of control the pests there. And make sure that they have enough space and that the feeders and waterers are not too crowded. And you mentioned it started with one bird. You could try isolating her for a few days and see if the behavior stops. Meanwhile, you want to coat the poor naked pecked areas with blue coat. And if the area isn't super irritated, you can also try mixing up a solution of blue food coloring and cayenne pepper with a bit of water, as the taste will definitely deter the other hens from pecking, and it'll help provide that blue color that'll cover the red area. If a few days of isolation doesn't stop pecking, you may need to consider removing that bird from the flock. Now, the so-called experts kind of recommend trimming the bird's beak. It's called debeaking. I don't really think this is a good idea. It's one of the things that bothers me the most about factory or battery hens. A lot of them have been debeaked to prevent them from cannibalizing each other because they're bored. They're shoved up together with each other. It prevents the birds from preening, and it's from being able to forage for bugs and plants since they've lost the tip of their beak. And it can be very painful too, which is definitely going to increase their stress levels, and it's most likely the cause of this in the first place. Now, one note, your pecked birds are going to need added protein to help regrow those lost feathers, which I think I've mentioned in previous podcasts. You could try a higher protein feed for a while or supplement with vitamins, yogurt. You can even feed them mealworms. The thought of giving eggs to a chicken kind of bothers me, but a lot of people give them scrambled eggs too, believe it or not. Now, that's really all the Q&A I have for today. However, I do have good news. I have 2 guests currently lined up to come on the show. The first guests are next. I actually have to talk to them in about 10 minutes. But you'll hear about this next week. Tom and Shareva Naughton. They have a lovely farm in Tennessee, but you may know Tom more from the Maki documentary he produced a few years ago called Fathead. He apparently did this as a rebuttal to Super Size Me. I saw it recently and thought that they would be great people to talk to. So if you have Amazon Prime, go check that out before you tune in next week, as it's really worth the watch. There was really tons of good information. And before ketogenic or paleo or primal became even remotely mainstream, Fathead discussed it. So I recommend a good watch. Otherwise, you'll hear from them next week. Our other guest, who I'm also really excited about talking to, is Doug Kaufman. Now, Mr. Kaufman does a show called Know the Cause. And way back when I was trying to figure it all out, all the different voices in the underground health community, his voice really caught me because his show is all about functional medicine and digging for the root causes of illness instead of papering things over with drugs, which is what allopathic medicine does. Doug has agreed to come on the show and discuss food storage for livestock and the hidden fungus, mold, and yeast in that food, among other things. It's going to be a really great show, so make sure to tune in when we cover that. It should air shortly after the 4th of July. Now, that's all for now, and I'm going to talk to you folks next week. And until then, good night and God bless.
You've been listening to AgriCast Digest. If you like what you just heard, please share with your friends. And don't forget to go to ChickenCoopGuides.com/podcast to download transcripts and archives of this episode, as well as take advantage of any freebies or trials offered in this episode. You can then visit our private podcast Facebook page, also linked there. This has been a Bluebird Media production.